Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Building a Safer Virginia discussion with our House legislators. My name is Laurie Haas. I'm the Virginia State Director and Senior Director of Advocacy for the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. I live in Richmond. I work all across Virginia, and I have the great fortune and pleasure to work with an array of legislators, many on this call this afternoon and this evening, who represent some of the best in Virginia, who work towards a safer Virginia, who work hard on your behalf to build a safer Virginia that's inclusive and equitable and works for everyone. We're joined by these legislators this evening. What we're going to do is I'll introduce them, pose a few questions, and we'll hear from each of them individually. After we conclude that portion of our event, then we're going to open it up to you, our audience, to pose questions. We want you to engage with these legislators and ask your questions so that you can understand and appreciate their hard work on your behalf. There's a function at the bottom of your screen that's a Q&A. So please take advantage of that and pose your questions in that portion of the screen. So I think we'll go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover and in a short period of time. I want to welcome, first off, Majority Leader Charnelle Herring. The Majority Leader was elected to that position in 2020. We're excited to have her with us this evening. She represents the 46th District and has since 2009. She is a past chair of the Virginia Democratic Party. She was elected chair of the House Democratic Caucus in 2015 and then assumed her Majority Leader role in 2020 when the Democrats took control of the House of Delegates in a resounding way in 2019. We're so glad to have you, Delegate. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Laurie.
Since becoming Majority Leader in 2020, your caucus has supported and passed historic legislation across so many issues, across so many places and spaces and interest levels for, all of the Commonwealth. And as I said in my remarks, with the goal of building a safer, more inclusive, and more equitable Commonwealth. I wish we had time to go over everything that y'all have done. It's just been amazing. It's been particularly impactful to a lot of people, a lot of constituencies. But for our audience today, we want to learn more about the Clean Slate bill that was passed in 2021. We know this legislation is historic in its nature, and we'd like for you to tell us more about House Bill 2113.
Thank you so much, Laurie. And I got to take a moment just to thank you and your advocacy and the coalition to stop gun violence and how much work has gone in to make Virginia safer. And we appreciate you and your advocacy and your participation in so much that we do. And it's certainly our success is the coalition's success, and we wouldn't be here without your support and work. And you're right, we've accomplished a lot. And one of the things I'm so proud about is that Virginia Clean Slate Act. This is something that originated with members for over the years, putting in bills that talk about expungement and address it. Virginia's law was that you cannot expunge a conviction, and we took the bills and sent them to a crime commission and came up with the comprehensive legislation that will allow expungement, automatic expungement for certain misdemeanors, and then for class 5 and 4 felonies, a petition-based system. What is good about automatic expungement is that no one has to hire an attorney. An individual who qualifies, basically it's 7 years after the completion of your sentence. If you go 7 years without a conviction, the Commonwealth will clear your record, essentially, and seal. It's a heightened sealing process. And so that means when it comes time for access to money to start a business or housing or education, those barriers will not be in place as if they are today. And it's transformative for Virginia because we are, I think, have now come from the bottom when it comes to about giving people second chances to moving to one of the top states in the country when it comes to granting people second chances. So I'm really excited about the bill and the hard work that's put in by so many legislators to get this done. It is a bill about redemption, I always say, and it's a different way of going about our legal justice, our justice system. And when we talk about reform, this is I think one of the key components of reform.
Thank you. And real briefly, can you talk about the implementation? When does that happen?
Yes.
The enactment, that sort of.
Absolutely right. So everything should be full steam ahead by 2024. Right now, we are looking at trying to quickly seal those the marijuana charges, for example, were sealed under the decriminalization bill of last year. So, but this bill includes possession with intent to distribute, which means it's not necessarily someone who's dealing drugs, but has a weight in the marijuana possession that puts them in that category. The process of reporting crimes to the CCRE, actually, those reports to those crimes will start. That process will begin July 1, where we will have basically a gap so that this will not be part of their permanent record. But by July 2024, everything should be full steam ahead. And so that's what I'm really excited about, is that, yeah, and especially no one having to go to a court and go to an attorney is a big help to many.
Well, we know, I witnessed just a part of the effort that you put into getting this bill done, getting the language, getting it passed, getting it, through your caucus and through the Senate. It was amazing. And we are all very, very grateful. And thank you. And to our audience, just a quick note, Majority Leader Herring has to leave us shortly. She has a previous engagement. So we were just enthused and pleased to know that she took some time out of her day to join us this evening. So thank you. Next up, we have Delegate Lopez. Delegate Alfonso Lopez has represented Arlington and Fairfax, the 49th district, for 5 terms, I believe. I'm correct on that. He's used his leadership to advance gun violence prevention legislation in the past. And this year in particular was strategic in getting a bill to expand what's known as the default proceed. And I'll let you explain that, Delegate, because you can do that better than me. From working with the Virginia State Police from 3 days to 5 days to give them the time they need to perform the background check. Delegate Lopez is also the founder of the Virginia Latino Caucus, the first legislative caucus representing Virginia's Latinos in the General Assembly history. So we are pleased and welcome to you, Delegate Lopez. Specifically regarding your bill, can you share your thoughts about why it's important to allow state police the added time to complete a background check?
I'd be happy to, Laurie. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to talk about this with everybody. Just by way of background, the question that you're posing was posed to me on the floor by a member of the majority party who was a strong Second Amendment, in his mind, Second Amendment supporter. And I responded, why is this? He said, well, why is this important? It doesn't make a difference. And I said, well, say that to the families of the victims of the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Say that to the families of the victims of countless shootings that have taken place because of the default proceed measure, and this loophole. So just by way of background, individuals who buy a gun from a licensed dealer have to undergo a background check. And Virginia law enforcement officials only have 3 days to complete this check, or had 3 days. And if the background check isn't completed in time, or even if the authorities indicate that they don't believe the background check can be completed with a 3-day time frame, dealers are allowed to sell the firearm anyway. This is known as a default proceed. With 89.5% of background checks conducted through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS, provide an answer within seconds or minutes about whether an individual is legally allowed to buy a gun. About 10.5% of cases require further investigation and review by FBI and ATF agents. However, under what we had in Virginia, under the default proceed rule, those agents only had those 3 days to conduct and finish their investigation. So even if an individual is eventually determined as someone who should not be allowed to purchase the gun, default proceed meant that the seller could still sell the gun after 3 days. Now, the FBI had recommended extending the 3-day period to allow more agents more time to complete the background check investigations and reduce the number of prohibited purchasers who were able to purchase firearms by default. What we were basically doing was saying, even those extra 2 days, that 3 to 5 days, which is what was suggested in previous documents by folks at the federal level, that can save lives. Those 2 extra days can help save lives. And so, you know, and the fact is that the numbers bore it out. And I want to thank Laurie and her team for all of the amazing help that they did in helping lead this coalition, helping us get this bill passed. Because we knew that in calendar year 2020, there were 327,000 delayed transactions out of 781,000 transactions total. And that 9,157 of those delayed transactions were placed into a further research status. Of those 9,157, 8,135 were improved, but 1,022 were denied. And so here's what's crazy about this. Of the further research that led to approved, 2,390 took 3 days or more, and 308 were approved after 15 days. But of the ones that were denied, where someone was able to purchase a gun under the default proceed rule, 787 were denied in 3 days or less, but 235, let me repeat this, 235 took more than 3 days, and far too many took more than 10 days. So here's the thing. Just those 2 extra days and us following what the feds had requested was a huge step in the right direction. And we all saw what happened last week. The federal level, they actually passed legislation out of the House of Representatives to eliminate the Charleston loophole. And so Virginia is, you know, helping to lead that charge in addressing the problems with the Charleston loophole, going from 3 to 5 days, but we need to be getting rid of the entire loophole completely, I think. Thanks, Laurie.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate. And I want to make note that the delegate is sharing numbers from the Virginia State Police. Those are peculiar to the Commonwealth. These are not federal numbers. These are the numbers, the denials that he spoke about, and then the subsequent numbers, they're specific to Virginia. So this bill is going to save lives when the Virginia State Police have the added, 48 hours with which to conduct and complete a thorough background check. So thank you, Delegate. We're most appreciative.
Laurie, just one small thing. For decades, the default proceed was 1 business day.
Yes.
1 business day. And we only got it to 3 business days last year, and we wanted to get it to 5 business days this year, or the previous year, so previous session. So thank you for your work on this.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Next up, we have Delegate Kathleen Murphy. Delegate Murphy represents Virginia's 34th district, parts of Loudoun and Fairfax counties. She has been in office for the past 6 years. She's always been a gun violence prevention champion. She ran on this issue, she won on this issue, and she continues to vote her time, having founded the House Gun Violence Prevention Caucus and worked on the Safe Virginia Initiative over these last several years. She has been working on legislation in the Virginia General Assembly in the domestic violence arena and other areas. We look forward to hearing from her. Delegate Murphy, we want to hear specifically about HB 1992. the bill that addresses perpetrators of domestic violence and their access to firearms. Can you tell us about your bill?
It's been 7 years, by the way. I was elected in a special, so I have that extra year thrown in there. I have been fighting for this since the first day I walked into the House of Delegates, and everyone told me to go over and talk to Todd Gilbert because he would tell me what needed to be in the bill and didn't need to be in the bill so it could pass. And I believed them. And I went over and talked to him, and he told me what I needed to change in the bill, and I followed his guidance. And when we took it to committee, I stood there and was just stunned when they wouldn't even allow it to be heard. They wouldn't allow the bill to be heard. So this is a bill that I've put in, I think, almost every session that I've been in the House of Delegates, and it is a bill to prohibit people who've been convicted of assault and battery of a family or household member. And we had to be very careful how we defined that, from purchasing, possessing, or transporting a firearm. Someone is beating the living daylights out of the person who they are in the same household with or living with. We don't want them to have a gun because surely that gun will be used. There were over 1,300 domestic violence homicides in Virginia from 2006 to 2015. And that's an awful lot of dead people. So every year I put this in, and this year we were able to get a version of it passed, which I'm really delighted about. But the problem this year was that they wanted the definition to be narrowed for household member to someone who were in an intimate relationship and shared a child, had children together. So if you're just in an intimate relationship and you don't have a child, I guess that means they can still beat you up and still carry a gun. Believe me, we will try and correct that moving forward. But this idea that someone who's convicted of assault and battery on a family member, that they should still have the right to carry a gun is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So our goal is to continue moving this forward. This version of it did pass and is sitting with the governor. We've asked him to make an amendment to this bill to include intimate partners, even if they don't have children, because that was taken out by the Senate. But we are moving it forward every year. We move it a little bit more. And so that's a positive, but I still am anxious for this to be passed finally and have full meaning and full protection for victims of domestic violence.
Well, we so appreciate your efforts, Delegate Murphy. It's important work. We know that in the Commonwealth, far too many women are murdered by their intimate partners. We know that women of color are disproportionately affected by domestic violence, and this is an important issue that we address in the Commonwealth. There was a sad story out of the Hampton Roads area, and I believe in the last week. So this bill, I believe, will save lives. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to point out that Every Town for Gun Safety says 62% of intimate partner homicides in Virginia are carried out with a gun.
Absolutely.
62% is a big number.
It sure is. And thank you for your hard work to keep victims of domestic violence safe from their abusers. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Delegate Mark Levine. He's represented Virginia's 45th district, parts of Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax County, and I believe 6 years has been in office. Delegate Levine has carried bills on gun violence prevention for his entire career, and we're really appreciative. Of note and of importance is the two bills he carried this year, a bill to prohibit firearms within 40 feet of a polling place front door, and then another bill that codifies an executive order that then Governor McAuliffe put in that prohibited firearms in state buildings. And then last year, the House and Senate passed rules to prohibit firearms inside the Capitol building and inside the Pocahontas building. Gratefully, Delegate Levine was able to expand that to include the Capitol grounds. So we're appreciative of your hard work. This is going to affect so many of us, so many of your audience members. We come to the Capitol, we come to the Capitol grounds, we come to the Pocahontas building, and we'd like to do so in a sense of safety and to be able to use our voices and express our concerns without being intimidated. So thank you, and tell us about your bills.
Thank you, Laurie. First of all, I want to join the chorus of thanks to you personally. For those who don't know what happens behind the scenes, Laurie and I don't talk 5 or 6 times. We talk a dozen or 2 dozen times during session, every aspect of strategy and language. And Laurie, you've been right there at the grassroots, getting people there, and frankly, just providing advice that's invaluable. So folks should know how hard you work. Your cause, like mine, is born. You entered politics like I did, out of a family tragedy. Actually, Delegate Murphy did as well. And I think that lends you to your authority. And of course, it took a dozen years of you kind of in the wilderness, building up support. And then with the Democratic majority, we were able to finally achieve this. It's almost like a water against a dam, and it burst through with so many good laws. My 2 bills, the Safe Polling Bill and the Safe Capitol Bill, both deal not only with protections against gun violence, but really protections of democracy. They really are twofer bills. And you don't have to look further back than January 6th to see the damage that's caused by folks who don't respect democracy. And thankfully, there were some, but were not many firearms that day, or I really fear January 6th could have been not just a terrible day, but a catastrophe. It's also born out of my own experience, which is having a guy stand outside my kitchen window with a loaded assault weapon. I was told was powerful enough to blow a hole in one wall of my house and out the other wall, and me calling the police and being told by the police and the Commonwealth Attorney that the laws of that time, which was laws that existed before the Democratic majority came in, could do nothing to stop the man. He was there to protest me and to protest one of my bills, actually a bill that would have banned the very gun he was carrying. He actually threatened on Facebook, saying that if we tried to take his gun away, we would kiss our family members goodbye. But under the law at that time, there wasn't enough to do anything about him. So I've always been of the firm belief that people can, I believe in First Amendment, people can protest, they can yell, they can email us, they can run people against us. That's all part of democracy. But armed intimidation is not. It's never appropriate. And so these 2 bills are designed to protect not just gun safety, but democracy. So the first bill, the Safe Polling Bill, says that when you go to vote, you will be voting in a gun-free zone. The police can be called if necessary, they can carry arms, but you don't have to worry that the person you're standing in line to vote next to is angry at you because he or she disagrees with your candidate of choice, and y'all get in an argument and have a battle in the polling place. The people who work in the polling places, and they do a fantastic job, and I want to shout out to the registrars who heavily supported this bill. They work 13-hour days in one little place, and they don't want people with guns getting into arguments. Let's face it, again, elections can be quite places where people get in hot disputes, and you don't want guns around that. And also recount centers. In fact, there were a couple of Virginians that went up to Pennsylvania to intimidate the officials there in the Trump-Biden recount. And that would be illegal as well. So that bill went through, I'm proud to say, House and Senate, party line vote, but we got it through. And I fully expect the governor to sign it into law. The other bill, the Safe Capitol Bill, was actually a tougher bill to pass because, as you point out, it wasn't just banning firearms in the Capitol and in Pocahontas, but it's in all state government buildings, and it's in Capitol Square. And that's largely to allow folks like the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and the other great gun violence prevention groups to exercise your First Amendment rights. Because there had been threats. There are threats every year. In fact, last year, some of the gun-wielding advocates literally tore down signs and said that if police came after them, they would use their guns. Well, now we have a law to make it clear, because Richmond, frankly, wasn't clear that they had the power to stop what was going on. And now, for the first time, your advocates, Laurie, can march peacefully along with the people who disagree with us. They can also march peacefully, but on an equal basis, on equal First Amendment basis. So Capitol Square will be gun-free, again, with the exception of police and things like that. I will say the Senate watered it down, as they often do with our gun bills, as they did with Delegate Murphy's bill, which I strongly supported as chief co-patron. Love Delegate Murphy's bill, and we'll fight with her to bring that back again in a stronger form. They watered it down. They threw in a bunch of exceptions. They took out the parking lots. They took out parking structures. And obviously, I regretted that. But there's still a lot in this bill. And you know, even if the General Assembly changes, even if the governor changes, this is a bill that I hope stands the test of time and makes clear that you can lobby us, but you can't intimidate us with guns. And so I do think it will protect democracy for some time to come. And maybe with your help and the help of advocates listening, we can convince the governor to undo some of those exceptions. If folks want to do that, contact me, and maybe we get an amendment to have an even stronger bill. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate Levine. We consider these very timely and very necessary bills. As you mentioned, armed intimidation threatens everyone's voice. It threatens everybody's, democratic right to petition their government, to march, to be at the General Assembly, to use their voice. Making polls gun-free, I think, is equally valuable. Next up, we have, and this is a great segue for Delegate Price's bill, I think. Delegate Marcia Price represents the 95th district, which includes parts of Newport News and Hampton. She was elected in 2015. Thank goodness. We've loved having her at the Virginia General Assembly these many years, and she's been an ally and a help and a strong voice for her district as well as the rest of the Commonwealth. She was appointed chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee and served in that capacity this last year. She was recently appointed vice chair of the Privilege and Elections Committee. And thank goodness, because Delegate Price passed a historic bill in 2021, the Voting Rights Act in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Again, expanding everyone's right to use their voice and use their vote. It's one of our most sacred rights in this country. And I believe that I just can't thank you enough for doing this. I can't thank you enough for the Commonwealth, and we look forward to hearing from you about your bill.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Laurie, for the opportunity to share this evening. And thank you again, as others have said, for your continued partnership in building a safer Virginia. So I've worked with you, your advocates, Moms Demand, and so many advocates on gun violence prevention legislation since I started in 2016. And I was very glad to join the Public Safety Committee in 2020 under Chairman Hope. And so I got to see firsthand how difficult it has been to work on these issues, but how great it's been. But I've also been working on issues of democracy for that time as well. And so just to make it plain, some might wonder what voting rights have to do with public safety. But I would argue that the issue of voting rights is foundational to all other issues like gun violence prevention, because we need a healthy democracy and representative government that can respond to the issues that we're experiencing in the Commonwealth. And so, of course, we know our democracy is healthiest when all who want to participate can do so equally and safely. And so that's what we were focusing on. The Voting Rights Act of Virginia was a collaborative effort with New Virginia Majority, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Advancement Project National Office, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And these are folks who have been working in the space of voting rights for years, and they're all under the leadership of women. So I just want to say that for Women's History Month. But we know that, when we started working on this a year ago, we knew that Virginia was not immune to to the national strategic effort to suppress the vote of specific and targeted BIPOC communities. So we wanted to protect Virginians. We weren't sure what the Supreme Court was going to look like. And so, after the 1965 Voting Rights Act was essentially gutted in Shelby v. Holder, we were trying to figure out, much like other areas, what can we do for states' rights in order to protect it? And so House Bill 1890 requires changes to local voting regulations, have a period of public comment and evaluation to see how they would impact the protected communities. It allows for the Attorney General or an affected voter to initiate civil action in court should the protections be violated. Should they do that, and when? It also puts that money into a voter education and outreach fund, and it brings the federal mandate for language access requirements to state and local elections. It works to make all local elections have fair representation, and then for every single voter, it also increases and strengthens the protections against voter threats and intimidation, like we heard being discussed under Delegate Levine's bill. And so we are the first in the South to pass our own Voting Rights Act. We're the first state that was under the pre-clearance mandate from the 1965 Voting Rights Act to do this. And this is the most comprehensive state-level Voting Rights Act there is nationally. So it really is exciting, and I'm always excited to talk about it because in Virginia, we're working to expand that access, while you're seeing in the national news that other states are working to suppress the vote.
Thank you so much, Delegate Price. I just couldn't agree with you more. Voting should be, available to everyone in every circumstance, no matter what. And to think of the good that this bill is going to do for the Commonwealth of Virginia is beyond description. And you're right. Getting our voices heard at the ballot box is going to make the difference in the type of policies we see coming out of the Virginia General Assembly. Again, we can't thank you enough for that, and for joining us today, and also for your information sharing resolution bill. That was really important to some of us who do our work on evidence and research. So next up, we have Delegate Patrick Hope. Delegate Hope represents the 47th district. That includes most of Arlington. Delegate Hope has been serving the Commonwealth of Virginia since 2010. I started my career at the Virginia General Assembly in 2008. So we've been around the block a few times together, and we go back to the days when it was the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committee, and I'm sure he has lots of stories to tell. But he does serve now as chair of the House Public Safety Committee, much more aptly named, and has been a staunch supporter and leader on gun violence prevention bills. Throughout session, we talk often, and I don't have to call him, he'll call me also. So we appreciate his leadership, we appreciate his commitment, and him carrying bills many, many times over these many years. Many of the bills that we talked about today, Chairman Hope, started in your committee. We would like you to share your thoughts about the success of the 2021 session, perhaps a little bit about 2020, and next steps for the House, and perhaps maybe even tell us about your thoughts for 2022 and what that can look like.
Sure. Thank you, Laurie, and I'm delighted to be here with you, and thank you again for your advocacy and all the advocates that have made it possible to have a gathering like this. I view 2021 as really a continuation of our 2020 efforts to prevent gun violence in Virginia. Every bill we discuss today makes it safer in Virginia in different ways. And if you look at 2020 and the successes that we had, one handgun a month, the red flag law, reporting stolen or lost guns, background checks, allowing localities to ban firearms, Delegate Price's bill. We really are making substantial progress, and we're building on doing that. You heard today, allowing for comprehensive background checks and taking guns away from domestic abusers will save lives. banning guns in the Capitol and government buildings and at polling places. And we also added where school boards might meet as well. That removes the intimidation or the threat when people take advantage of that constitutional right to interact with their government and participate in democracy on election day. And in Virginia, it's very clear that we're making great strides to make voting easier and more accessible. And we want to do that without threat or without intimidation. So looking to 2022, I would say that a major disappointment of mine this session was a bill that we did get out of the Public Safety Committee, and it did pass the floor. It did pass the Senate, but it failed in Conference Committee. And that was a bill to ban the purchase of ghost guns or also related 3D printed guns, which are both very dangerous, or both related, but to ban both of those purchases. After all the amendments, what became of the bill was one that would have banned the purchase of an unfinished lower receiver. And people may ask, well, what is an unfinished lower receiver and how easy is it to buy? And so I wanted to find these things out for myself, and it took a lot of education, I think, for a lot of our members to understand just exactly what we were trying to do and really the problem we were trying to solve. So I went to a gun show this weekend to find out exactly for myself what one will look like, what an unfinished receiver, lower receiver look like. And I bought one. I bought one for $100 without a background check. And you can see it right here. This is what a unfinished lower receiver looks like. Really.
Hold it up a little higher, Delegate.
Can you see it here?
Yeah,
And so there you go. So this part right here is not hollowed out. And where this is where the guts of the gun would be, the hammer and the trigger, and a mechanism that would, with the right equipment, you can buy the right equipment to do this. You can mill a gun at your home. And the scary thing is that you can do all this, then you'll have a firearm without serial numbers. There's no serial numbers on this at all. And you can do it without a background check. It is completely untraceable. And law enforcement tell us, look, it makes it very difficult when they find a gun, a firearm nearby a crime scene, and you find a gun that was a ghost gun or homemade gun. It's completely untraceable. So they have no way to help solve that crime based on the weapon that's left at the scene. So making your own firearm at home is something that is growing in popularity. It needs to be part of a massive coordinated effort to close this loophole that I believe is only getting bigger by the day. And we close the background check, the loophole at gun shows. And so as we close one loophole, another one opens right up. And we have to be one step ahead of those thinking and looking and trying to avoid a background checks. And the place where I bought the unfinished receiver, I asked them, why would someone want to buy a 3D ghost gun without the serial number? And they said quite candidly that some people can't pass a background check. So we need to take an aggressive look at ghost guns in the future. The next thing I think that we should do, and this was a bill that was carried by Delegate Levine, was take a hard look again at the assault weapon ban bill for purchases. I saw a number of assault weapons at the gun show I attended this weekend. Our bill that passed the House in 2020, it was defeated in the Senate committee, and the Senate committee did request that a study be commissioned at the Crime Commission. Senators have asked for a study because they have some outstanding questions. And so I think it's really important that we be responsive, address any concerns that they might have so that we can bring our bill back in 2022. And finally, I think an area that we should focus on in 2022, which is also related to elections, but for other types of violence that we've seen cropping up throughout the country, is we need to take a hard look at our militias and make sure that we have a clear understanding of their roles vis-a-vis the law enforcement and our own National Guard. And so I think we need some clarity in our code. Those are just some of the topics that I'd like to see in 2022. But I do want to say how proud I am of the successes that we've had over the last 2 years in 2020 and in 2021, and being responsive to the Virginia voters who put us in this position. They sent us here with a mandate to make Virginia a safer place and free of gun violence. And all of us, you heard Delegate Levine talk about the threats, all of us get threatened during session by one way or another, and on social media and elsewhere. But we have even further resolve. We're committed to making Virginia a safer place and free of gun violence.
Thank you, Chairman Hope. That is, very good and very succinct, and we're happy to hear about the commitment for 2022. I would like to ask the rest of the panelists if anybody else wanted to speak to, just some of the politics and some of the barriers, that you've bumped into during the General Assembly sessions, particularly in 20 and 21. If you have some commentary, I'm thinking frankly and honestly about the Senate. If you want to share with us, some of your thoughts. I know that 2021 is an election year for all of you. If there's a few comments you'd like to make with regard to November. So we've got just about 5 minutes left. So I don't want to speak. I want a couple of you to.
Can I just say one quick thing? We're already seeing the hashtag that says "Make Virginia Red Again." All right, and we're already seeing the salivating from some on the right, especially national Republicans, that Virginia is a right place for them to basically get the GOP off the map. And we also know that for every single one of the major bills that we passed this year and last year, especially the amazing bills coming out of Patrick's Public Safety Committee last year, all 7 of those major bills on sensible gun violence prevention legislation, each of those bills will be reversed if the Republicans take the House back. Every single one of them. And the message that will go to the country if we lose any of the seats, the governor's mansion, the House of Delegates, will be that, insurrection doesn't matter. The incredible, poorly run Trump administration, none of that matters. Republicans are back. And the idea that we would allow that to happen going into this election year is the exact opposite, the wrong message we need to be sending around the country and around the world for that matter. But for every single bill that Laurie Haas and the folks at CSGV have been working on, every one of those will be reversed if we lose the House.
Delegate Price, do you have some comments for our audience?
Yeah, I would just also add, there's no such thing as assuming what anyone believes about an issue. You have to hear it straight from our mouths. So those of us on this call, we have voting records and we have the things that we've been actively working on. But if you haven't reached out to someone else, let's say a no vote, that you expected to be a yes vote on a bill that you've been working on, you don't have to be their constituent to connect with them and see like what's going on. Because, I saw some questions about some obstacles. Some obstacles were those no votes because we didn't get the majority in both chambers, even after it passed out of the House. The other thing that I would say too is that we have to find a way in order for the people to really be the ones who direct what are campaign issues. And so even though they're extremely boring and sometimes you don't want to take the time, take the surveys, because if you don't take the survey, somebody else is going to take the survey and then their issue might become the #1 issue when it really should be saving lives across the Commonwealth. And lastly, I'll just say, I would caution anyone that is asking for bipartisanship in this current cycle. As Delegate Murphy had explained, and I think all of us, we tried for years for bipartisanship, especially on this issue, and we didn't get it. And so when people want to see unity across the aisle, that's cool. But don't come talk to the yes votes about unity. Let's talk to the no votes about unifying on this specific issue, because as was mentioned in those questions, Republicans from way back supported the assault weapons ban. That should have been a bipartisan effort, and it literally in large was not. And so I really just want to get away from empty sound bites of unity, and y'all support the people that are really doing the work for you.
Thank you, Sia. You're always the best.
All right, I'm clapping. I
Okay,
needed
go
y'all
ahead
to
and
keep those
clap.
claps.
No,
Go ahead.
I every single year when I put forth this bill to take guns out of the hand, I have tried every which way except standing on my head, honest to God. And I fail to understand why a guy's right to own a gun supersedes the victim's right not to be threatened and not to have that life-threatening gun in the house, along with him beating her on a daily basis. Why the Senate in particular values his right to have a gun more than they value her right to be safe. And that is something that just plagues me. I don't get it. I don't understand how any man who claims to be a man and, respectful of women could walk away and be proud of himself for taking that vote.
Thank you, Delegate Murphy. We're a few minutes past time. I just wanted, do you have something real quick, Delegate Levine?
I do. I just want to say that the people who support fewer gun regulations are very loud. I don't think they're as numerous as the people who support gun violence protection, but the ones who disagree with us are very loud. They're very active. They're very organized. They contact all of us frequently. And although I'm confident that all of us represent the majority of Virginians, I'm encouraging people to be just as loud, just as, send emails out. Let us know that you're out there, because I fear that we are the silent majority and they get a lot more attention than we do. And now that you can protest at the Capitol without not being afraid of guns, please come out and do that. Couple questions I saw in the chat about my bills. Yes, I'm not giving up on assault weapons. I do think we need to come back to that next year. And we will come back with that. But, the conversation shouldn't begin the moment you introduce a bill. By then, most of the die is cast. So if you care about that issue, find the senators who voted the wrong way, contact them, ask them what their problem was. Make them tell you what their problem was. Get it down, get it in writing, get it in an email. They should have to answer. If they don't answer you, find a constituent in their district and get them to answer that constituent, because people have to be held accountable for their votes. And I should say that with regard to the Safe Capital bill, it was watered down in the Senate, but the governor can amend it to strengthen it again, including the question of parking lots. So if you want to help do that, contact the governor's office. Politics is not you elect someone and you sit back and you watch it happen. That ain't how politics works. Politics is a full combat sport, and you've got to be around and contacting your legislators, contacting your governor, contacting your senators and your delegates, and pushing for what you want to succeed. And that's what makes things happen in Richmond.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Well, with that, we're going to have to wrap it up. And I will say, that we share with our audiences all the time. These are public servants and they work for us. We vote you in and you work for us, and we appreciate it because this group on this call has been working very, very hard to advance some just amazing legislation that, again, is building a safer, more inclusive and more equitable Virginia for all of us. And we couldn't be happier to have you with us today. I will share with all of our supporters that it is an election year, and to make certain that gun violence prevention is on the ballot. Make sure that you ask those questions and that you know who the candidates are, that you know what they represent and what they're going to do for you if elected. So we couldn't be more grateful to everybody for joining us on this afternoon's call. We couldn't be more humbled to hear from all of these amazing legislators. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up and close it up. And perhaps we'll do this again soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining the coalition discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Laurie.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks, Laurie.